Happy New Year, dear Connected Yoga Teacher listener. I am so glad you are here and that we made it together into 2023. Today's episode has been brought to you by Offering Tree. And speaking of which, have you seen the new update from Offering Tree? They just launched website templates and they look amazing. What I love most about this is that yoga teachers asked for more options to build their website, and Offering Tree went one step further and hired designers so that the colors and the options work really well together. Because if you're like me, not everyone is meant to be a website designer. If you need help with your yoga website, check out offeringtree.com/Shannon. There is a special discount for our podcast listeners with that link. That's over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. So if you don't know this already, that's the other side of my business other than the podcast. This is a really cool online membership for yoga teachers, PTs, movement educators, healthcare professionals, and really anyone who wants to learn more about pelvic health. Most yoga teacher trainings don't focus enough on pelvic health and the things that yoga teachers need to know, and that is why Pelvic Health Professionals was created. We hire worldwide guest experts to teach us the most up-to-date information, and you get to attend calls live or watch the replay and submit your questions and get them answered in real time. Visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to sign up. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. If you are brand new here, I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And this podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land, also called the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. Up here, I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And if you are a returning listener, oh my goodness, thank you for coming back. You know how things go around here. This podcast was created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you are connected to the information and ideas that are going to support you as you build your yoga business. Because I get it, leaving yoga teacher training and jumping out into the world of teaching and running a business can feel like, oh my goodness, such an amount of learning and unlearning. And it can feel really tough. There are tough times. Last week we talked about this. Rebecca Sebastian and I chatted about how we sometimes feel like quitting. But as you can see, I'm still here. I didn't quit because running a business and sharing yoga, it is a lot all at once. Rebecca and I talked about how learning and unlearning all along the way and doing the internal work as a yoga practitioner, but also as an entrepreneur, how it's a lot to take in. And this week, we're going to continue that learning and unlearning, but in a really beautiful way. I cannot wait to dive into this. I'm so thankful that Chioma took the time to send me a video reply. How amazing is that, Connected Yoga Teachers? So the podcast went out about people getting kicked out of a yoga class or people feeling unwelcome in a yoga class. And Chioma took the time to send me a video reply. And when I got it and when I listened, I just thought, oh my goodness, I need to request permission to share this on the podcast. She was so gracious in saying, yes, go ahead, share it on the podcast. Her response is brave and vulnerable, and I think we as yoga teachers can learn so much from this response. So if you missed the episode 275 it was, called Kicked Out of a Yoga Class, where I shared all kinds of stories of people being kicked out of yoga class, I'll link to it in the show notes, but you do not need to go back and listen to that one. You just can if you want to hear a shocking amount of stories of people being kicked out of yoga class. And before we dive right into this and you get to hear Chioma's response to that episode, I want to also tell you that I learned so much more about her when I went to her website. So I requested a website link and some social media links. I'll make sure to put all of those in the show notes. But I want to tell you that I'm really excited that I even made this connection. Chioma Njoku is the owner and chief mindful operator at the Mindful Bookkeeper. She hosts her own podcast, which she did not tell me about. I just found it on her website. It's called Cheers to Your Prosperity. I've already started listening to it. I love it so much. And I was already taking notes on what I could implement for my own business in 2023. So I was thinking, yep, we need to get Chioma back on the podcast to talk about money stuff and anything with finances, because she's very real about her own financial struggles and how that, combined with her profession of being an accountant, she's been an accountant for 18 years, along with her work as a financial coach, all of that enables her to really help entrepreneurs, small business owners, to keep more of their hard-earned money in the bank without sacrificing the things that make life enjoyable, like time with family, dinner out with friends, and really good coffee or tea, and being able to enjoy those moments with the funds that you have. So I won't get into this any further. Stay tuned. I'll definitely have Chioma back on the podcast. Do reach out if you have money and financial questions. Let me know what those are so I can include them in a future podcast episode. But for right now, let's dive in and hear Chioma's response to the podcast episode of people being kicked out of yoga.
Hi, Shannon. How are you? My name is Chioma. I was actually a guest on Amanda's podcast, MBOM, a few years ago, and you and I got connected on Facebook around that time. Sadly, I have not done well to connect with you since, until now, which I just listened to one of your podcast episodes, kicked out of yoga class. And I just feel the need to really share with you, because I too have experienced being kicked out or strongly encouraged to not return. And I have to confess, I too have been part of the problem. When I first started teaching, what I learned, I was trained in hot yoga. And then I was also trained in like a hybrid Baptiste/forced vinyasa style. And when I taught my hot yoga classes, from what I learned and from what I was strongly encouraged by the studio, I learned and was encouraged to not allow the students to drink water, to not even allow them to wipe the sweat off their brow or their arms, that if they needed to rest, they should go to Savasana, but still not drink water and still not wipe off the sweat. It's to be one with the heat. And it made sense at the time, I suppose. I could get that just because my background, I do have a fitness athletic background besides accounting. Like that was something that's always, fitness is part of my life. And so when I trained for marathons, for example, or trained for 10Ks, the road races, I definitely had to hydrate before I ran the race, because what I was taught from my background is by the time you're in the activity and you're trying to drink water, it's too late to hydrate. So you do it before. And so I justified my not allowing students to drink water or wipe the sweat off their body by saying, by trying to teach them to hydrate before so they won't have a need to drink water. And the other reason why I was strongly encouraged to not allow students to drink water in class was that it was to get them to concentrate so that they can focus and perhaps not distract other people in the room. Today, I understand that everything I just said in terms of what I was taught is foolish, because your practice is your practice. And if no one distracts someone that much. Like if you're in the zone, you won't really notice what's around you. So maybe I'm speaking for myself and how I practice. I never allowed anyone else to distract me unless it was really, really, really obnoxious. Wiping sweat and drinking water is not distracting. So Yeah, it's just that I feel bad that I now understand that that was not really okay. Um, and having experienced the other side, something that I consistently experienced in yoga was just I didn't always want to be touched. I didn't always want a hands-on assist, as an example, because a hand-on assist was often a hands-on wrenching around like you're the exorcist, if you ever watched the movie. And it's like, especially if some people are bendy and flexible, and I happen to work my way to a certain level of flexibility that was a bit more than some of the people in my classroom. So some teachers wanted to just come and be like, ooh, let's see how far she can go. And that's not always a good thing. So I didn't enjoy getting an assist because an assist was always like towing the line of injury. And whenever I refused, I was told that something obnoxious like, that's why I have daddy issues. I'm not trusting the process. The studio that I worked in, same hot yoga studio, and I'm not trying to say blame, this is where I learned. They were always saying that assists are yummy and juicy and you should allow yourself to be supported. So I'm always trying to convince myself to allow myself to be touched. But then it didn't leave me prepared for certain unfortunate incidences, like I'm in down dog and a teacher will come and slap my rear end just because they wanted to see how hard my behind is, or the unnecessary squeezing of my biceps and shoulders. Like, that's not a hands-on assist. That's not right. This is just putting it lightly.
Connected yoga teachers, I wanted to pop in here for a moment to share something that has been helping me as I book podcast interviews. Now, I want to tell you about this because I know many of you book one-on-one sessions with people as well as book people into yoga classes. So you might not already know that I use Offering Tree for both my yoga business, and recently I've started using their booking software for my podcast interviews. And I have to say, I am very impressed. With different previous booking softwares, I didn't have all of the exact features that I needed. So I wanted Zoom links to go out automatically. I want people to be able to see all of the times that are available in their own time zone, so I don't have to do any time zone math. And I also want to be able to send both email and text reminders because life is so busy and I do not want people to miss their booking. If they've booked a podcast interview with me, the worst thing that could happen is that they forget to put it on their calendar for whatever reason, and then the time goes by and they just don't show up for that podcast interview. So those email reminders are really cool, but a text reminder, oh my gosh, sometimes that's the difference. So if you are a yoga teacher and you send out email reminders, or maybe you send out texts, manually to remind people that they have a yoga class with you or they have a one-on-one session coming up, or if you're sending out Zoom links and taking payments in different ways and you're doing all of this manually, make sure to check out Offering Tree. They make all of this automatic and easy to do. Also, I have a discount code for you. That's over at offeringtree.com/Shannon, so make sure to check it out. Now let's get back to Chioma's response and the rest of what she shared with me.
So the event where I ultimately got kicked out was I rejected a hug. And I was just at a point where I was tired of being touched unnecessarily. And there was some male teacher that I was a little bit too familiar, and I rejected a hug. And so unfortunately, he was the owner of the studio. And I say unfortunately because that's where the power tripping came in. And basically that didn't go over well. Apparently I made him feel unsafe. And if I did that to any of his other teachers, they wouldn't have been able to focus and teach. And I didn't realize me as a paying client had a responsibility to make the teachers feel better. And that's actually a big problem. I'm there to feel better. I'm not paying so that I can also stroke someone's ego and put myself in a position to be touched unnecessarily. If I don't want to be touched, I don't want to be touched. But apparently, at least before 2020, that was a big deal because I dealt with that in many studios where I'm just like, no thanks. I was trying to be nice about it. No, thank you. I don't really want an assist. And some teachers would just lose their minds like, huh? So yeah, this last straw was where I physically had to push the person off me because I said no. And basically I was told that if I come back that to not look at him and not acknowledge his existence. And I just said, I'll do one better. I just won't come back. So that was my experience in a nutshell. And I just wanted to I suppose, contribute to the conversation just because this is not so much about bashing yoga. There's bad apples in every single industry, every single one. I'm in accounting and finance. There's bad apples there. There's bad apples in the doctors. There's bad apples in construction. And I think it's important to also share. I appreciate this episode because not many people are willing to speak to some of the unfortunate things of the industry. But in understanding some of the shadows of any industry, specifically this industry that's overall intended to be good, it helps those of us who do teach yoga. And unfortunately, I don't anymore. I'll explain that in a second. But I think it really helps those of us that are really trying to keep up the positive nature and the healthy nature of the industry. It makes us better. So it's sometimes we do have to take the negative feedback, the neutral feedback, along with the positive feedback to really make this a much better situation. So I stopped teaching actually because of that incident. I just got tired of the toxic experiences. And I think I also needed to understand how I was contributing to the problem. So your episode really brought some areas out in which I have to acknowledge and accept responsibility for my part in other people getting kicked out of yoga or feeling uncomfortable in yoga. So I'm taking 100% ownership of that. That's why I'm speaking to it. I appreciate this episode because it reminds me to do better. And as someone who's thinking about returning to the studios to teach, this is definitely something I will keep in mind. This was definitely an episode that contributed to some great growth. So thank you so much for putting this out there. Thank you for asking permission for people to share. That's not everyone does that. So I really thank you and honor you for that. And I'm happy. Sorry that it took me a few years, but I'm happy to be able to connect to you and feel free to share what I said if it helps. But yeah, Shannon, I'm grateful to you in this episode. Have a beautiful day and take care.
Wow, connected yoga teachers. I don't know about all of you, but I just feel incredibly grateful to Chioma for sharing this. I'm so impressed with how she just took the time to create a video response to the podcast episode, never thinking that, okay, this is going to be shared on the podcast, but then saying yes when I said, you know what, I think we can all learn from this. I think we can all learn from your stories about how things have gone as a yoga teacher, but also as a yoga practitioner. Connected yoga teachers, I would love to hear from you, whether that's in a video reply. You don't have to do that if you don't feel comfortable, but if you do want to send a video, oh my gosh, it's so nice to put a face to a name, to some thoughts in a video, or you can send me an audio. You can do that right from our website over at theconnectedyogateacher.com. There's a button there where you can send me a voicemail. I love to hear from you. Or post it in our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. That's under the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. The link to that is also on our homepage at theconnectedyogateacher.com. Or you can share your comments in the show notes. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/305. Lots of ways that you can let us know what you're thinking about this episode, either privately or so that everyone else can read your response and see. And we can continue this conversation about how we can make yoga more accessible, more inviting, more welcoming, so that students aren't walking away feeling like, wow, I just got kicked out of class, or yoga's not for me for this reason, or something's wrong with me and I can't be a yoga student. I know that all of you listening feel like you want everyone to have access to yoga. And so I love it that you took the time to listen to today's episode. It's really an important piece of this conversation. All of the links for today's episode are over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/305. So make sure to go there if you want to check out Chioma's website, if you want to check out her podcast, if you want to see the previous episode about being kicked out of yoga. All of the links that I've talked about today are over there. And if you would like to hang out a little bit more, in January, we have a call coming up inside of Pelvic Health Professionals. Anyone is welcome to join if you're interested in learning more about endometriosis. So we have a previous call that we did a while back with a PT who has endometriosis, and we learned a lot in that call. And now we're inviting Dr. Matthew Leonardi, who's one of the leading gynecologists who helps people who are needing surgery for endometriosis. We've invited him to come and talk with us inside of Pelvic Health Professionals so that we can ask more of the questions that we have about endometriosis. And if you're wondering, what does this have to do with my yoga students? Some of your yoga students are walking into class and they have endo, whether they've been diagnosed with it or not. If any of you listening have endometriosis, you know that the length of time to diagnosis is really long. I think the average is 11 years, if I've got that right. Also, there is some really conflicting information if you Google endometriosis online, and that is why we've looked for some of the world-leading experts in endometriosis to come and talk with us inside of Pelvic Health Professionals so that we can get the most up-to-date information. You can listen in and you can also ask your questions. So that's happening Friday, January 13th. It's online via Zoom. If you're listening to this and it's past January 13th of 2023, not to worry. We have the replay of that call and every other call that we've done since we started in Pelvic Health Professionals. That's all ready for you over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. And if you're thinking, what does this have to do with me as a yoga teacher? I'll also, in our show notes, link to a call that we did on bowel health and yoga. That was with one of our guest experts, Michelle Lyons. Shout out to her. We learned so much in that call about how we as yoga teachers can really help people who are dealing with bowel health issues that they may not be telling you about when they come to your yoga class, but things that yoga really offers can help someone like that. So there's a podcast episode where you can listen in to what does one of these calls sound like. You can listen on the go. So I'll make sure to link to that also in our show notes. And if you want to learn further, we also do podcast episodes on pelvic health. You could just head on over to theconnectedyogateacher.com, type in pelvic health, and see all of the topics that we have covered in any way on that, and go and binge listen. Maybe you've got some time still for holidays as we move into the new year, or maybe you're back to work and you have some time driving around or doing the tasks that you're doing in life, cleaning, laundry, all the things. I just want to tell you that I am so, so grateful that you've chosen to hang out here and spend some time. It means a lot to me. I also am so grateful for our team, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead, for bringing this podcast to you, as well as doing so many other things behind the scenes. Let's take a nice breath here together as we close out this episode today. Finding that breath, expanding your ribs out to the sides, into the back ribs, into the front ribs, all at the same time, expanding out like an umbrella. And on your exhale, allowing the ribs to come back to center. And just asking yourself here for a moment, what can I do this week to stay connected to myself, to my yoga practice, and to my community so that I can share the yoga that lights me up?